sharing a reading experience. I took down notes from a very interesting book called Mormonism and the Negro by John J. Stewart, written in 1960. Many have criticized this church for not allowing the blacks to hold the priesthood until 1978, even when the critics' very own congregations only allowed a handful of theologically educated individuals to hold the priesthood. I found this pre civil rights essay a very interesting look into the distant past at a time when Jim Crow laws were in full force. I was surprised at how progressive the ideas were for that period of time. I hope you listen and receive something worthwhile from this. Remember, these are just my notes. These notes are what I gleaned or thought about while I was reading. These notes are what caught my interest because the ideas expanded my knowledge or made me think, reflect, or ponder in some way. This video might inspire you to read what I did. It's my hope that you'll search from the best books and gain information and ideas to help you to become a better person. The more you read, the better you'll think, and the better you think, the more you'll be able to face life's challenges successfully. Finding an explanation of different colored peoples runs into difficulties. For example, if you say people developed skin color as a result of climate, then how do you explain dark skinned Eskimos and white tribes in the tropics? The explanation of the curse of Cain being dark skin is not mentioned in the Bible. All the Bible says is that a mark was placed on Cain, but it doesn't explain what that mark was. And even though we can't find any biblical accounts of blacks being members of the priesthood of God, we can't find any policy limiting priesthood rights to blacks either. When the church was organized in 1830, the unpopular scoundrel in society was not the slave owner, but the boat rocking abolitionist. People in both the northern and southern states hated the abolitionists. They were seen as radical nuts, much like most of the country views Muslim jihadists today. Rather than being mainline thinkers, most converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, called the church from here on, tended to be divergent thinkers and unpopular abolitionist advocates. On page 217 in the fifth volume entitled History of the Church, you'll find Joseph Smith said, quote, "They have souls and are subject to salvation. Go to Cincinnati or any city and find an educated Negro who rides in his carriage, and you'll see a man who has risen by the powers of his own mind to his exalted state of respectability." Unquote. At the age of 38, President Smith was also seeking the presidency of the United States in 1844, when most of the nation still favored slavery. In his political manifesto, widely published in 1844, he implored, quote, "Petition also, ye goodly inhabitants of the slave states, your legislatures to abolish slavery by the year 1850, or now, and save the abolitionists from reproach and ruin, infamy and shame. Pray Congress to pay every man a reasonable price for his slaves out of the surplus revenues arising from the sale of public lands and from the dedication of pay from the members of Congress. Break off the shackles of the poor black man and hire them as labor like any other human beings. For an hour of virtuous liberty on earth is worth a whole eternity of bondage." Unquote. Members of the church opposed slavery, and the Book of Mormon strengthened that position with the words found in 2 Nephi 26:13, stating that, quote, "He invites them all to come unto him and partake of his goodness, and he denies none that come unto him, black and white, bond and free, male and female, and he remembers the heathen, and they are all alike to God, both the Jew and the Gentile." Unquote. As you can imagine, when the church publication entitled Messenger and Advocate called for the country to take measures to liberate the slaves, and the Evening and Morning Star wrote, "Free the people of color, the local populace located in the heart of a slave state." Prodded on by Protestant ministers, mobbed and destroyed the church's printing office and tarred and feathered the editor. Eventually, locals drove the church out of the area. It is noted that only a very small number of blacks joined the church in their beginnings. Those that did join were not denied the priesthood. As noted on June 2nd, 1847, of the journal History, William Smith ordained a black member of the church to the office of elder in Batavia, New York. Elijah Abel was another black man who was ordained to the high office of 70 on April 4th, 1841. He traveled across the plains and managed the Farnham Hotel in Salt Lake City. There has never been a church policy discouraging brotherly Christian love towards blacks. On the first trek across the plains to Utah, there were 3 former slaves. The church had a record of kindness towards the Negro. Whatever prejudice exists in the mind of any individual does not reflect the policies of the church. However, the privilege of the priesthood service was withdrawn on May 31st, 1879, when Brigham Young met with John Taylor, Abraham O. Smoot, Zebedee Coltrane, and L. John Nuttall to discuss ordaining Negroes to the priesthood. Brigham Young was convinced the Negroes were the descendants of Ham and said, quote, "White friends may wash the race of Cain with fuller soap every day, but they cannot wash away God's mark." Unquote. His opinion reflected the opinion of the day, even though there was no solid evidence of this view. He also contradicted Joseph Smith's opinion on the subject. On page 272 in Volume 2 of the Journal of Discourses, Brigham Young said, quote, "Indians are just as much the children of God as we are, also are the Africans," unquote. He goes on to say that the Africans' time had not yet come, and concludes by saying, quote, "When all the rest of the children have received the blessings in the holy priesthood, then that curse will be removed from the seed of Cain, and they will come up and possess the priesthood, and will receive all the blessings which we are now entitled to." Unquote. On November 3rd, 1947, David O. McKay asked, "Why is there shown in the Church of Christ discrimination against colored race?" This is a perplexing question, particularly in the light of the present trend of civilization to grant equality to all men, irrespective of race, creed, or color. He went on to say, "Now, if we have faith in the justice of God, we are forced to the conclusion that this denial was not a deprivation of merited right. It may have been entirely in keeping with the eternal plan of salvation for all of the children of God." Unquote. Now, if everyone were identical in every way in their existence before this mortal one, the diversity of conditions among the children of men would indicate discrimination and injustice. In a statement of the First Presidency of the Church given August 17, 1951, they said, "Why the Negro was denied the priesthood from the days of Adam to our day is not known." Unquote. It is known that African descendants were supporters of Jehovah, but are there conditions under which these spirits take on immortality? Well, the details are not known. We know that spirits are willing to come here and take on whatever handicap they may be associated with this journey. Being without the priesthood is a handicap, and these spirits were willing to assume. The church policy of 1860 regarded the Negro as thus, quote, "Negroes can be members of the church, receive patriarchal blessings, enter the temple to perform baptisms, become the heirs of the celestial kingdom, and every other right due to worthy members of the church, except become ordained in the priesthood at this present time. Unquote. The priesthood is the right to perform select rituals in the church. All churches have this rule to a degree. For example, a church may authorize a padre to bless the sacrament bread and wine to be given to the congregation, but disallows the attendees from taking on that responsibility. The priesthood has always been given to just a few key servants of God in every church. Critics of the church denounce the fact that we limit certain members from performing religious rituals by restricting the priesthood, yet they will in turn declare that there is no authentic value in our priesthood. If the priesthood is what they claim, shouldn't they be grateful that certain people are kept away from such humbuggery? Stating everyone should be given the same responsibilities and duty indicates that these individuals believe that everyone is identical. This is not the case. God may have made mankind, but he did not make everyone exactly the same, despite what you think Thomas Jefferson declared. It is good to be idealistic, but we should also be rational. Do you think all people should be given a doctorate? Most likely not. We do not question the correctness of the justice nor the logic of varying degrees of excellence and opportunity among people in life. Rewarding everyone equally, regardless of merit, is not rational. Do those who have not yet graduated think it's unfair that those who have met the prescribed courses of study get to graduate while they don't? Likewise, we may be on the same path, but we are not in the exact location on that path. Each has varying degrees of advancements in mental and spiritual experiences and therefore have different needs and experiences. We can't say that God draws a line at a certain point and then everyone above that line goes to heaven and everyone below that line goes to hell. That line cannot be reasonably and justly drawn. We can't say, you stole $1,000, so you're going to hell, and then say to the next one in line, you only stole $999.99, so you get to go to heaven. Neither can we reasonably say that everyone will go to heaven regardless of how filthy, unworthy, or disobedient they've been. We must leave these decisions in God's hands and know that he will provide innumerable degrees of salvation and exaltation through his justice and mercy and provide each on their own level a place where they feel most comfortable and best suited. The same thing happens when we are born. We are selected with a particular role based on our individual circumstances and needs for our eternal development. The circumstances we find ourselves in are not the result of some arbitrary roll of the dice or the will of a fickle God. We know that there are millions born to become insane or deformed or become handicapped by some accident or born to squalor, filth, poverty, and degradation. Why aren't we all born with exactly the same rights, abilities, and opportunities? Because if we were, we couldn't grow, progress, learn, or develop correctly. Our free agency does not exist here, but in the life before we found ourselves in this one. What we do now determines our future path, just as what we did before this life determines the path we walk now. Think of our eternal existence like a race of many laps around a track. On any particular lap, some move faster than others, providing themselves a better position in the next stage of existence. If you have a poor lap and this time around, you can do it better in the next lap. For example, George Washington Carver may have been born disadvantaged, but he passed up most people in this life. Everyone warrants different circumstances because we're all different. Doesn't this infinite variety of circumstance give further evidence of being assigned a station in life dependent on the circumstances in the life before this? Do you suppose God or the spirit that will occupy the body will not know of any social stigmas that might exist? We know that since mankind only has a finite mind and God has an infinite mind, we do not see things in the same way. The belief that all God's children stand in equal positions before Him is contrary to the fundamentals of God's dealings. Higher critics do not accept this, but the church does accept that people are not identical and have different needs provided to them by the unfairness of Earth's life. I wish you the best in your happy readings. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, fare thee well.